his method, syllabus, his syllabus essentially. So anybody who followed that, they would be known as that syllabus. That's essentially what it is. So, for example, anybody who's a graduate of a certain madrasa, they sometimes have titles for them. That he's a Qasmi because he studied in Darul Ulum, come with a certain flavor, a certain way of doing things, certain prestige sometimes as well. Those who study in Sahanapur, they call the Mazahiris. Those who studied in Nadratul Ulama, they call Nadmis. Anybody studies in Medina University, they call okay, Salafis, I guess. Usually, not always, not 100%, but yes, usually. So essentially, that's how it became named. Now, what would happen is that Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, the Qadiri silsila comes from Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, rahimahullah. However, later on, about 5, 6, 7 generations down, there was Abu Hassan al-Shadili, who was from the Qadiri silsila, but he was very effective in a renewing of how to do this. So then, after him, it became known as the Shadili, Qadiri. But then there was probably other offshoots that would remain Qadiri, and so on. The Alawis, Ba-Alawis as they call them, there's the Sanusis from Libya, and so on. So that's all it is, just a name given to a particular way of doing it. And as I said, in each one of them, if you get somebody who doesn't want to stick to it and wants to be a bit too innovative in thinking that I can bring more people in if I do it this way, just like churches have done to bring more people in and said, okay, we're going to have a few music festivals, and songs and things like that. So that's how you'll see that. Now, if you can add new practices or whatever, as long as they're within the Sharia. In some orders, they'll feed. That's part of nothing wrong with that. But if it becomes the food only, then that's a problem. Right? So we don't want a distraction of food or anything. You come here just for dhikr and so on. Some focus more on outward dhikr, like loud dhikr. That you have to say La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. Some say that their method is more Allah, Allah. That's how they focus. Others say Allah, Allah, Allah. Different ones have found different things that are beneficial. Some say we don't do much loud at all. It's all focus in the heart. It's just internal dhikr. So that's how these differ. So there's multiple across the world. There's multiple. There's not only 4. That's just mostly there were 4 in the Indian subcontinent.
So one question based on that is since there's no hadith to suggest those azkar, we've got all those new ideas. Isn't it innovation?
There's no hadith to suggest these azkar. The dhikr of La ilaha illallah. Allah.
In that number, specific numbers.
That's just like saying that they found it effective. That if you do it 200 times or 1200 times or whatever, that you're going to get something out of it, because they give different numbers to different people depending on how the Shaykh assesses their distraction, how much he reckons the heart is so off track. Say more dhikr for you, and then they adjust it, or they make you do a certain dhikr first until they think that one of the main aspects that you really struggle with has been cleared. Then they focus. So somebody will come to the Shaykh and say, no, I've got a major issue with arrogance. Like I do this very well, or I do that very well. I know I've got arrogance. Sort me out. So there's some adhkar, some du'as, some azkar that if you focus on, they're supposed to be very helpful with that. Someone will say, I've got a problem with passion, to say it lightly, right? I've got a problem with desire, sexual desire, or so much eating. But then they'll suggest something. The master sheikh is like a master physician. They provide different prescriptions for different people. Right? And that's essentially what it is. Different tariqas have different ways of doing it.
Can I ask a question on that? So obviously, we've talked about the innovation bit previously, and then you explained that there will be things which will be innovation and there will be things which will not be. Now, as an outsider, Someone
do you
can
tell?
say that, someone can say that you are allowing this and this, but why not jumping? Why, what you is doing, what you are doing, I consider that as not
I'll
being
tell you the difference. Those who say that you can do it this way, La ilaha, their reasoning is that when I say La ilaha, that means there is no God. So I'm also symbolically gesturing behind me that there is no God. So I'm throwing any other possible God figure in my mind away. La ilaha illallah into my heart. Like they literally go down into the heart. And they found that effective. But they're saying that this is not the sunnah way to do it. The sunnah is to say La ilaha illallah. But this is, we just found effectively to do that. And this is just a means. When you've reached your goal with this, you will stop doing this. I've seen Hazrat Maulana Yusuf Mutala Sahib, in the early days, that's what he used to do. In the last several years, when I was still at madrasa, after like 4 or 5 years, he stopped doing that. He was into internal dhikr or some other dhikr that he was doing. It's a means. Now, those people who do the hadara, and I've got a lot of friends who do that, and I have respect for them in terms of, mashallah, their adherence to the thing. I just find it difficult to accept because they try to prove it from a hadith, and I have a problem with that. They say that there's a hadith where Ja'far radiallahu anhu met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam after a while or something, and he hopped around him like in excitement. Enjoy, right? And for me, and again, this is just the academic difference, an academic difference. I just find that, did you actually look at that and say, okay, we're going to do a dhikr like that? Was he doing a dhikr or was he just enjoying? So you want to do that, enjoy, go ahead and do it all day long. I mean, no, you're going to do it all day long. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, did somebody look at that and say, okay, I find that we can do a dhikr like this. I think it was that what happens, really where it comes from, is that when you're doing dhikr somewhere, you get elated. There's a certain, because taking the name of Allah, you could get a bit elated, you can actually lose yourself sometimes. That's why the mashayikh are very particular that you don't lose yourself. The purpose of dhikr is not to make yourself look crazy, right? But it's an internal connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, we've been in gatherings where suddenly somebody will say, Allah, right? They're just overwhelmed, or they'll just stand up and start literally, and they can't be helped. They're sitting and then just calling out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're just overwhelmed. Is that a good thing? No, not necessarily. It's good in the sense that but you need to learn to control that, because the point of tasawwuf is not to lose yourself, right? It's not to lose yourself. It's internalizing the connection to make it the profound connection. So that's why, for example, our great Imam Ibn Abidin al-Shami, in his great book, he says, nobody should stand up unless they're moved to stand up. They can't help standing up, because dhikr is supposed to be calm. Dhikr is supposed to bring sukoon and sakina. But definitely people have found, and I know people have friends who do this, I've observed it, they're getting something out of it, right? That's just my view, that we don't do that in our tariq, and find it a bit too much. So there's going to be boundaries as well. That's another thing. There's going to be boundaries as to where does it become a bid'ah. They're not going to call that bid'ah. Of course they're not. So, and I leave that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's just, if you're asking me, I'm going to say that I don't prefer that. You have anything on that? I know he's been trying to ask a question for like the last half an hour. Yeah.
Do you mind if I just answer that? So going back to this issue that reciting certain adhkar, certain dhikr formulas, a specific number of times that hasn't been mentioned in the Quran or the Sunnah, is that an innovation, a reprehensible innovation, a bid'ah? Then as the Mufti alluded to, if someone says, I'm going to do 50 La ilaha illallahs now, and just like when I go to the gym, the physical gym, I start with 10 reps of 5 kg, all right? And then when I get muscles get a bit stronger, 10 reps of 10 kg, okay? But you're going to do consistent reps, and you're not going to fall below that number, whether you're on a bad day or good day. On a good day, you might do more, but definitely won't fall below that number because it's the only consistent way to build up muscles. Then the spiritual muscles of the heart tend best to be done with repetition, reciting half a juz of Quran a day or 1 page of Quran a day. And whether I have a good day or bad day, I'll try not to fall beneath that 1 page or 1 juz. Is it in the sunnah to do that? No, but consistency is. So if someone says reciting a page of Quran a day is a sunnah, that requires a proof for which there isn't a proof. And then it will become a bid'ah according to the general definition of scholars. There might be some who say something else. That's point 1. Point 2 is, well, that still doesn't explain why I can now, or for example, that doesn't explain why Ibn Taymiyyah, in his Majmu' al-Fatawa, says, well, actually, Ibn al-Qayyim says, his student says it on behalf of the teacher, that I heard Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah say that min at-tajribat as-salikin, from the spiritual experience of the spiritual traveler, the wayfarer, is that whoever recites Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum La ilaha illa ant bi rahmatika astaghi 40 times between the sunnah of Fajr and the fard of Fajr, will find that his heart will never die. Now the dua itself, in that form and in a similar form, shorter form, is found in the Sahih Hadiths. But 40 times? No. And certainly not the specific time as well. Between the Sunnah of Fajr and the Fard of Fajr, no again. The dua is in the Sunnah, but the number is not, and nor is the time. And yet Ibn Taymiyyah is saying he experienced that when you do this, there's something good that happens to the heart. Ibn al-Qayyim is so impressed with this that he mentions it in 2 places in the Madarij al-Salikin. So how is that allowed? Or is that a bid'ah? If someone says that to do this is a sunnah, 40 times between the 2 time periods, they require a proof from the Sharia, and there really isn't a proof, and so it will be bid'ah. That's point 1. If there is something in the sunnah from the Prophet that is taught to us that we should be saying in between these 2 times, that will take precedence over anything else, because the Prophet and his guidance is best. But if you trust the Shaykh, and he is a recognized scholar or imam, a reputable imam within the Islamic tradition, it is allowed to benefit from their spiritual experiences. This practice of spiritual experiences goes all the way back to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajmain. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu had a large string with 100, which apparently 2,000 knots. So is it 2,000 or is it 200? With many knots, and he would, it's like a tasbih bead, and he would, just before retiring to bed, he would recite Subhanallah or Subhanallah wa bihamdihi 1,000 times or 200 times, the number I can't remember, as his own practice. So that's permissible, providing one doesn't say it's a sunnah, providing we try to give life to the sunnah du'as in our life in general, and providing it's taken from an imam that has some religious authority recognized in the ummah, then it's allowed to do, and that spiritual consistency has proven to be helpful from the time of the Sahaba, from the time of the early Salaf. And that's why, unless the Mufti can correct me, I'm not aware of any classical scholar who said that in and of itself, specifying a number that hasn't been stated in the texts is a bid'ah. No one has said that unless with those conditions.
Definitely a modern bid'ah. Like that I don't
But
think
to say
that
bid'ah,
it's
absolutely.
definitely a modern bid'ah. It's like I don't not heard of any sort of saying that, except maybe Ashab al-Dawa, not even them, I don't even know if they do. That's just absolutely crazy. That's just taking Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah to another extreme where he didn't. In fact, another example of that, Ibn al-Qayyim, his student, says that my Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, whenever he would be parishan, he didn't say parishan, but I think that's a really cool word,
Yeah.
right? Whenever he would have a bit of turbulence, he would take the 5 or 6 verses in the Quran that mention Sakina,
Yeah, I have to sit in-
the ayat of Sakina, and he would, there's nothing like that in the hadith that read these ayats,
And in
or
fact,
that they have these benefits.
and in fact, when he couldn't do that himself, he would try to get his family to recite Ayat Sakina over him, because he said this just that 7 verses have a powerful effect. Same thing, just sticking on Ibn Taymiyyah. When he wanted to do tafsir, like understand a tafsir of a particular verse, he'd read through the books, sometimes a dozen or sometimes 20 or 40. Then he'd take himself off to a very remote place and he'd do sajda and he'd recite a particular sunnah dua, which is meant to be recited that time, to ask Allah to give him the opening. So actually, those who admire Ibn Taymiyyah, but unfortunately are not quite clear what the tradition is about, and say that all of this is a bid'ah, would have to then say the first person that deserves being called an innovator would be Ibn Taymiyyah himself, according to those who love Ibn Taymiyyah. And the same with Ibn al-Qayyim. There are examples of him reciting this particular verse of healing 7 times, a verse of the Quran in, I can't remember, Surah Yunus. Point being is, though, that one can go overboard. So I have met people who kind of don't know even basic sunnah du'as for walking the masjid, walking out, getting up in the morning, drinking, finishing your meals. But they know all these du'as that other sheikhs have done, which is fine if I have a problem, I'm going to a physician of the heart and give me some hal, give me some way out of this situation for my debt, for my anxiety, and then you start doing that. But if I go around collecting these dhikrs and awrads from the mashayikh without actually trying to give life to the sunnah, that doesn't seem to be the right way for a person whose asl should be the Prophet.
And I want to say that some Sufis do make the whole thing a bad name. I attended in another country in Ramadan. I attended Tarawih prayer. I was advised to go to the Tariqa Masjid. I got there 20 minutes before. They were doing loud dhikr, and it was projected, and they were all taking part in this loud dhikr. Tasbihat, repetition of certain adhkar, right? They're all reading it, is probably the Shaykh had given it to them. Then Tarawih started. They did a very quick Tarawih of just from Wadduha to the end, right? Then the Tarawih finished. Even in between the Tarawih, 4 rakats, they were reading something. Tarawih finished, they started adhkar again. And I'm like, this is Ramadan. This is the month of the Quran, and so on. Yes. What can you not make Quran the main thing of this month? You can't even do a full Sunnah Quran Taraweeh that you just read from Wadduha. I went to another masjid of the same tariq. They kept the Taraweeh short, but they didn't have any adhkar. And he explains, he says, look, it's late at night. This was about 5 years ago. And people need to go to work, that's why. So, okay, that's fine. But here they're making them do adhkar rather than reading the Quran. I just went to another place recently in a very blessed city. And there was a Dars-o-Hadith. We finished the Dars-o-Hadith. And then they started nasheeds. Praising the Prophet ﷺ, beautiful nasheed. Went on for about, say, nearly an hour. And then we started Isha prayer. In Isha prayer was the 2 of the shortest rak'ahs, Isha was done very quickly. It was quick, there was food, and then we started in nasheeds, praise of the Prophet ﷺ, again for another 1 hour, 1 hour. So the whole thing was about 2.5 to 3 hours, but the salat was the shortest of that. So sometimes people do go overboard on this. I just want to mention to you, that's something to do with it. This balance doesn't exist. They go overboard with this. And okay, if it's done sometimes for a particular cure or ilaj or purpose, fine, but it becomes the standard, right? Maybe the nafs enjoys this more than that, or well, I don't know what the reason is. I mean, of course, standing in Tarawih is, Quran is. But that's why our ulama, they were balanced in everything. They refined everything. Tasawwuf was in India, it was extreme. The Sheikh Ahmad Sarhindi came first, rahimahullah, and sorted out a lot of that. Then came Shah Ahmed Shaheed and Shah Ismail, and they sorted out a lot more. Then came Mawlana Rashid Ahmed Gangohi and Mawlana Qasim Mawlana Ashraf Thanwi, and they sorted it out even further. They took out all the fluff and all the extra, the
the extremeness from it. So yes, there is extremeness in some cases. You have to be careful. I'm going to take his question first because he's been asking for a long time.
And then three questions.
Just a quick one, Jake. Assuming there were different beliefs and they use different actions
Yeah,
to work
yeah.
on the heart.
Right.
So there is a brief which I've seen. What they do is they work on the heart, and during the training, some extraordinary things happen, like someone will jump or someone will go back. Is this within the bounds of Sharia or not?
Again, I mean, if you're trying to aim for that you better jump. Then, yeah.
Within the
No,
bounds of Sharia or not?
So look, if you become overwhelmed with a dhikr and you jump, as long as you're not doing it to jump, it's okay. The main maqsad is the dhikr. I know a lot of people I know, they've done certain adhkar, like one of my roommates in madrasa, he saw the older students doing La ilaha illallah. He had no permission or anything. He went into a class in the weekend, closed the light and started doing this. And he said, I just started seeing stuff. Certain adhkar have a certain power, right? When you do dhikr of Allah, Allah can remove certain veils. Certain veils are removed. You see certain things. There's an effect. Just like with certain medicines, they're an effect. You can start hallucinating, right? So that's why you have to have a shaykh when you do anything beyond the sunnah adhkar, because they're done as a ilaj. If you start taking too many paracetamol or morphine or whatever, there's going to be an issue. So it's that kind of a thing. So is it good to jump up? No. Is it good to have that, jerk or whatever it is? No. But if it happens, and it was, you just have to work on not doing it because there's no sunnah to do that.
Sorry, and just go on that question. Sorry, so Imam Nawawi, one of the great scholars of the 7th Islamic century, he's asked this particular question, and he says, exactly as Sheikh Abdurrahman said, if someone intends to get into a state where they either lose it or they start, flopping all over the place, then that is wrong. It's not permissible. But if it happens because the dhikr of the dhakir overcame, the dhikr of the person making dhikr overcame him, it's allowed, but there's nothing special about it. Because the best of people, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'een, did not lose the composure, even though they lost their will in the divine will. They didn't lose themselves. They were aware where I am. It's Saturday morning, 6 o'clock. But their will, their likes began to disintegrate and become what Allah likes. And that kind of annihilation or losing it, where I lose what I desire for what Allah desires, is really the goal. So Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, the fourth of the 4 Imams, he says that he doesn't use these words, but these words are used by one of the Hanbalis after him to sum up his words. The sir of the sunnah, the secret of the prophetic teaching is to leave my own likes, my own murad for Allah's murad. Leave what I desire and want for what Allah Jalla Jalaluhu desires and wants. And in fact, that could actually be a definition of tasawwuf, if ever there was one.
There's no such thing as bid'ah hasana within the religion. I understand that outside within the religion.
Just to clarify,
So-
perhaps the next or the following session would be on bid'ah, just to clarify that. So we can tackle it all in detail, because that's a detail.
I mean, a simple answer is that bid'ah is a relative term. So what some have said is that if I innovate a new way that the Sharia has no problem with, but for example, doing this 10 times or 40 times or whatever, we're not even going to call that bid'ah, because bid'ah is bad. So you can only call bad things bid'ah. So those guys will say this is not a bid'ah, it's completely fine. Right? Others, they say, look, it's a bid'ah in the sense that it's a new way, but it doesn't go against any of Sharia. Okay, we might not have a direct rule, but it is allowed within the general scope of it. So that's bid'ah hasana because it's a new thing. right? Like, for example, having lines in topics is a bit of hassle. They don't have lines in functional time. They stuck their ankles together for a bit to get it right. Right, but we have lines, so we don't just stick. So that's a bit of hasana. Do you understand? That's what it is. It's just the semantic difference.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's around the claim that from the Sufi because they have some secrets. Can you sort of just comment on that?
Yeah, for that you'll have to go to northern Scotland. There's an abbey there, and then you have to go for a certain symbol. You know, there's no such thing as secrets. There's no such thing as secret, but if you advance in this field, then Allah does open up things to you. Things become open because the veil, the facade of the world disappears and you start seeing realities of things. You can see the way Allah does things in that sense. You don't see Allah, but you see, He just opens up things for you. But they're not allowed to speak about this in public as people must understand. That's why Ibrahim ibn Adham wa Junayd al-Baghdadi, rahimahullah, he used to enter with his students and lock the door. And then he used to openly discuss. It's not for everybody. Imam Ghazali, in a number of places, he'll be having a discussion, then suddenly he'll say, I can't speak anymore. But there are a few who did speak and caused a lot of controversy. Like Al-Hallaj was definitely one of them. Although his might have been
Ecstatic.
yeah, so, but Ibn Arabi, Shaykh al-Akbar Ibn Arabi, he said a lot of stuff, right? And people just can't get it. So then he becomes a controversial figure in that sense. If that's the secret, then that's the secret. But there's no other secrets. Yes. We'll try to keep the answers very short now, so we can take like no more than 1 minute answers. Go on.
We're aware of the security in support of
Yeah.
Turkey has it. And
Yeah.
it's always up with
That's right.
that,
They do whirling
yes,
dervishes.
is that the soul as well?
That is a version of the soul as well. But the whirling dervishes, do you know much about whirling, like what their realities? I've not been able to figure that out as to why they do that and what the purpose is. I've seen it. I've actually visited one. I had to see it. Like what's going on here, just to try to figure out. Not being able to understand the significance, but I don't think the very orthodox ones do that, right? Because I know like Sheikh, just about Sheikh Mahmoud Effendi and all these, they are very kosher. They're very particular in what they do. It looks like it. I've not seen it. I've not heard about it anywhere else. Even in Uzbekistan, I don't know. But I don't know.
Also, it's just worth for ourselves keeping a hold of the asl of the foundation, which is methods are secondary, goals are important, which is what? Doing dhikr such that I remember Allah and the remembrance of Allah and the mindfulness of Allah becomes rooted in my heart. Okay, such that even when I'm not doing dhikr verbally, but somehow dhikr is still in my qalb. That's where we want to be getting. And maybe we will not get there throughout our lives, but the journey is what counts. And then the tawfiq is from Allah. Now, will it help if I sway slightly in a hadra, as the Shadhalis do, or they don't only sway slightly standing up, some of them sway excessively and move? Well, according to your fiqh rulings, many people, like Ibn Qudama in his fiqh rulings, will say that's out of bounds of our fiqh. It counts as the raqs, dancing, then anything. That's our fiqh. Some people, fiqh, will say actually it counts as a means to a goal, providing it's done properly and with adab. So we can sort out some of these tariqah differences through sound fiqh, through the fuqaha, through the scholars. But the tariqah modes in general are means to a goal, not a goal in themselves. It is possible that the whirling dervishes might have had their origins in trying to build up that hal. And going back to Sheikh Abdurrahman's example of, and they made a short prayer. but they did long nasheeds. I mean, one of the things about poetry nasheeds in praise of the Prophet ﷺ normally is it's meant to inspire. It's meant to just kind of bring that love and that shauq and that yearning for Allah, all the Prophet ﷺ this day. So that now we've done nice nasheeds with nice voice, and you've understood the meaning as well. It's not just kind of fancy words. And then we go and pray. It's very likely that where prayer is going to be that much more beautiful inwardly, because our hearts have already been, they're beating with the beat of Allah. But if the nasheed becomes the goal and the prayer, because what is the soul? In the end, Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani says, Kun ma'al haqq bila khalq, wa ma'al khalq bila nafs. Be with the real Allah, be with Allah, the truth, without creation, without people. So when we pray, there's nobody around to show off into in my mind. So I can be sincere to Allah. Be with Allah without creation, but be with creation without ego. And when I go home, the first thing I have to do is hang my ego on the coat peg so that I can have a decent relationship with my spouse and children, right? Otherwise it's not going to work, right? That's the soul. But the kind of step, the highest step of the soul is be with Allah without creation. Have it. So they say tahqiqul ikhlas. The soul, as Ahmad al-Zarruq rahmatullahi alayhi said, has 100 odd definitions. No point in having all these definitions. He said, look, cut to the chase. It all revolves around the essence, which is tahqiqul ikhlas, ridding the heart of all of the akhyar, all of the other than Allah. My love for money, my love for myself, my love to talk, my love for this, my love for that, my love, and replace it with Allah. And so that La ilaha illallah, throwing out all of the akhyar, all of the others, La ilaha, there is no God, no gods, no deities, nothing to be worshipped. Get it out the heart, illallah. So even if one sat down, just did the dhikr of La ilaha illallah with that manner, with that inward reality, that it's going to help me get rid of these false deities, these false gods in my soul, even if it's just the god of wealth or fame, all right? And inshallah ta'ala, so that the heart can be filled with Allah and his remembrance. That's about all these other things. Let's not confuse means and goal. And Allah knows us.
Yeah, correct.
Got two questions. First one is very simple. Is there a dummy's guide to Tasawwuf you recommend? And the second question is the Tasawwuf a purely an individual thing, or must it be something that's undertaken under the guidance or have it taken by our pledge of a sheikh? And leading to that, how do you know that you need to take pledge of a sheikh that lives next door to you rather than somebody who is on the other side of the world?
So I can suggest the book, right? Which is it's called the one I had in my hand before. It's up there. The path.
Can we just bring that book so that we can just highlight it on the?
You can bring both. The Path to Perfection. This is basically Mullah Masihullah Khan Sahib, who took from the teachings of Hakim al-Ummah, and he explains everything: the need, what a sheikh needs to be, and so on. So that's what I would suggest. I found that very useful. In terms of second one, do you have to be with the sheikh? Majority of people would really benefit. Just like with every other, with every other science or art, some people just naturally are very good at it already. I know of a few people who even went to a sheikh, like his dad's a sheikh, he's got murids. And he went to take bay'ah with his father, he says, you don't need it. And I know I've stayed with him, he is a natural wali, especially a fitrati wali. Some people are just like, they don't need it. You understand? But that's very minority. The majority of us, we have no discipline. So it's nice to be under sheikhs so that give me something to do. Okay. How many of you can go and study, for example, science or something on their own, if you wanted to, or coding? Few people can, but majority of us need a teacher and syllabus and timetable and supervision and exams. Same kind of thing here. That's the way I would look at it. Yes.
If someone's paid already,
Yeah. right?
Are they allowed to take bet with another sheikh?
That's a bit of a, that depends. How long have you been bet? Does the sheikh know you? Right? A lot of time you become bet, they don't even remember, you don't even remember because you're just done in a group or something. So it really depends. Technically, if you're not benefiting from a sheikh or because they're far away or something, you are technically allowed to move to somebody else, but you just have to be careful of hurting somebody's heart because that could be very harmful. So what you do is you say, unfortunately, I can't keep in touch, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. I found this. Would it be okay for me to go and join them? Normally the sheikh will like, no problem, because it's not a shop, it's not customers here, right? But it depends on how you do it. That's very important. Now, if you've not been in touch with the sheikh for 10 years and he doesn't even know you anymore, whatever, it's fine. You can attach yourself to another sheikh while keeping respect of the first sheikh. So it really depends on how you do it. But there's a lot of people, they don't really do much. They've been given a prescription, they walk around with the prescription in their pocket, they don't even dispense it. And then they find from a friend that they're attached to somebody else and they find that they're benefiting, so they go and jump to this person. They don't benefit because they're not really the same as the other friend in terms of practicing and dispensing. Then they jump to somebody else and finally they come back to the first one. So it depends on how you do it and why you're doing it for. So it's not like you have to stay with them till death. This is not like, we have divorce in Islam as well. It just depends on how you do it. You don't want ugly divorces.
Last question on the paper.
Sorry, just one more. It's right to portray Sufi. Minority sect.
No, that's what we're trying to say. The whole world was Sufi. It was not even a question. It's only in the last 70 to 100 years become an issue. And unfortunately, we're living in this time.
So perhaps certain people have identified.
Yeah. As I said, it's like they're Kabul worshippers or they're this or that, and they're deviants. They have no idea about the reality, even though you're being Sufi.
So it's really important when someone says something negative about Sufism. First of all, we're not defending the name or not, that's not. But if someone says Sufis are deviant, then say, what do you mean by Sufis? If they say people who don't pray, don't believe they have to pray 5 times a day, or don't believe they have to follow the Sharia, then I say, you know what? I agree with you. I agree with you. But actually, you might find that's not how scholars define the word Sufi. But if they say, oh, Sufis, they're deviant, and they either have no reason or they give a reason which actually that's part of the Sharia. You yourself have the mistaken understanding. Then inshallah, we're not really concerned with them getting the word Sufi. We're really concerned with understanding that that is actually allowed in the Sharia or part of the Sharia. It's really important that we get to the essence of these things. Otherwise, we moderns tend to get hooked up with external things. And the irony is the whole science of inward spirituality called Tasawwuf is actually about getting to the hub of things, the real nub of things.
Let me answer this question quickly. Been in my hand for a very long time. Can women connect to a sheikh? Yeah, lots of sheikhs do take males. It's a very personal relationship. Telling your sheikh, the idea of being successfully as a student of a sheikh is that you tell them your state. And of course, wherever there's men and women, particular third one sheikh, you have to be very careful, right? That it's a mature sheikh. Even some mature sheikhs have been let down and fallen prey there. That's why very, very careful. Have boundaries. And preferably, a lot of them suggest that your husband is involved in that, or is the third person in that. Are there any women sheikhs? They usually know. I mean, some sheikhs do have their wives or a female who is trained under them to manage most of their affairs, but you don't give pay to a female sheikh. There's such thing in majority of them. Of having a female authorized sheikh as such, but sometimes they use them as an ad hoc, teachers' assistants. Last question. Yeah.
So just on what you just said. So for example, there's the parallel between in Catholicism they go into the box as a
Yeah.
And so there's a human being on the inside. So where's the line drawn with actual confessing? Because you shouldn't do something wrong.
Yeah.
So
the sheikh can't forgive your sins, whereas the guy in the box can. The one you're talking about, they can. Oh yeah, you can be forgiven. Yeah. 50 Hail Marys you have to do. I don't know, maybe there's some overlap. Yeah, it's just basically, it's just like with anything else. Sheikh, I've got this problem in my stomach. But they just suggest an answer for you. Similar kind of idea. I've got this problem, I can't help but be arrogant when I do salat. Or when I do this work or whatever. Then they'll oh, I'm really having some this, having trouble with that. They just suggest it is the knowledgeable person suggesting. That's all it is. That's what you said.
But generally, sorry, generally it is a trained ear. The sheikh, he's a trained ear in the sense that he has understood from one way or the other that there are certain diseases of the soul and there are certain therapies for the soul, or diseases of the heart, therapies for the heart. And he has undergone that, or he's trained in that. So in that sense, and I don't like the comparison, but I can't think of a better one. So it's quite a bad one, unfortunately. You get psychotherapists or psychiatrists. The importance about psychiatrists is there has to be an interpersonal relationship between the psychiatrist and his client or his patient, that's the word, such that the patient can feel at ease with the psychotherapist and then start telling them about their traumas and their nightmares and how life is not going well for them. And then the trained ear, the psychiatrist, will say, okay, well, I can suggest these things for you. In the case of the Sheikh of the Tasawwuf, it's not just the trained ear, it's the educator of the heart, because through revelation, through his own worship, through his instructions by his teachers, he has understood something that science can't tell you empirically, which is the nature of the soul and how to remedy it and how to connect it back to the one that counts, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And one quite point, very simple, is that difference to you, especially I know you, is the fact that, as Sheikh mentioned, it would not be that, oh, I committed a sin, what do I do? You just repent and you compensate for it. You keep doing it, time and again, and you're very difficult for you to then get over with it. Then you go to the Sheikh, this is a problem now. But that's completely different to your normally sending and telling, oh, I did this last night, what do I do? The Sheikh was going to like it either. He would not even allow you to do it. He would say, just repent and keep it hidden. If you Sharia learn it, he would not engage you into this discussion.
Can I just have an anecdote there? So I know someone, I won't say whether it's male or female, and they had a problem of they couldn't lower their gaze and not yet married kind of thing, and just liking the opposite gender too much. And no matter, they're praying regularly and they're doing this, generally pious and whatever, but this is really bad in their lives. So they went to one of the Sheikhs of Suluk. They went to ulama, and the ulama would tell them this. Then they went to one of the Sheikhs of Suluk, and I was actually there with the Sheikh at that time. And he just put his head down and he said, when you think of this person or anyone like this in the future, just remember that they defecate in the toilet. And I was thinking, as the Sheikh understood the problem, the question was, what kind of answer is it? What's that got to do with this? After a while, I got it. Anyway, I met this brother. Actually, I met this brother in roughly this area some weeks after. And I was a bit embarrassed to kind of come to him because I was thinking he was going to say to me, kind of thing, who were you with at that time? He said, Abu Ali, I have to tell you, as soon as he said it, it struck me. But as soon as I got in my car, it just completely changed my whole conception of everything. Now my worry is that I won't like any of the opposite sex. Like ping-pong. But it kind of, and even now it's done the job. This is someone who kind of generally has a decent, practical medicine cure for something that a fiqh ruling might not solve. And I'll run over.
There was a parallel that you drew between the when he asked what is Islam, that's more to do with like the fiqh stuff, what is Iman, more to do with Aqidah, and then what is Ihsan, he said that it's to do with Saluh. So there was two other questions that you asked about, like when is the resurrection, and then also the parallel between.
So generally, because the essence of the Islamic sciences are three: Aqidah, Fiqh, and Tasawwuf. Okay, people when they talk about question of the final hour, the signs of the hour. So both questions were the signs of the hour. So you can put them under eschatological signs of the hour question. And anything to do with signs of the hour, Yom Qiyamah, can be put under Aqidah.
They're very grounding, understanding mortality, very grounding. That's just everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very true.
ويا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا الله have mercy. Ya Allah have mercy. Forgive us, guide us. Oh, Allah, bless you for your generosity. Allah, we ask you for your we ask you for your love. Oh Allah, connect us to you. Oh Allah, all these brothers and sisters who are listening during at this time. Oh Allah, we discussed spirituality, we discussed your love, we discussed your remembrance. Oh Allah, accept this from us. Oh Allah, and draw us close to you. Make us of the Dhakirin, Dhakkarin, Shakkari. Oh Allah, bless us and allow us to follow in the traditions of our forefathers and the Mashaykh up to our message. And accept all of those who and Allah, all of those who have assisted in any way whatsoever, and allow us to return in a much better state. We came here and allow us to continue in that state. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursalin, alhamdulillah.
And please try to get this book if you haven't got it already, inshallah. It really is just a lovely